Hi, I'm Dr. Mary Ellen Thompson, and I'm your instructor for OTS 880. Hopefully you've already watched the introductory video. This is the first lecture for week 1, and we're going to be covering a lot of information in a short time, so it's really important that you do the reading as well as watching the videos. Not everything in the reading is in the video, and not everything in the video is in the reading. So chapter 1, why do we do research? Let me see. Here we go. So it really is important for answering questions about daily practice. So you'll be hearing a lot about evidence-based practice as you go forward in this program. And basically, that's saying, do we have evidence for what it is that we're doing? So we're looking at what works. Can we make it work better? We want to know, should the insurance company pay us? It would be nice to be paid. And it's also going to be possible for you at the end of this class, I think, to be able to understand how good the research is that's been done by your peers. So basically, research is any kind of investigation that uncovers knowledge. So you can research what's the best milk to drink, or you can research whether women are better drivers than men. But the definition of research put forth by DuPois and Gitlin is that it is a multiple systematic strategies to generate knowledge about human behavior, human experience, and human environments. And that's really what we're interested in as occupational therapists. So we want to make sure that our processes are clearly specified so that they're logical, understandable, confirmable, and useful, which is a really critical point that sometimes people forget. So there are multiple systematic strategies for research. You've probably heard of experimental, which is also known as quantitative, and naturalistic, which is known as qualitative, and we will touch briefly on mixed methods as well. So in terms of our thought and action processes, when we are doing research, we are either moving deductively, which is going from a broad idea to a specific idea. This is generally used in experimental or quantitative research. And basically those who are using deductive reasoning believe that there is a truth that can be found, that there's a single reality, and what we are doing is testing hypotheses that are put forward. Whereas inductive reasoning goes from something more specific to something broad. And so basically inductive or qualitative studies are saying that there's different truths out there, there's multiple realities, that each person can have their own reality, and through the process of inductive reasoning, we're developing hypotheses. So research should be logical. It should be very clear and method-based. So sometimes people think, for example, that qualitative research is not method-based, but this isn't true. It is method-based, and we'll be talking about those methods. It should be understandable, so you need to be as explicit as possible as to how you collected your data and how you looked at your data, and it needs to make a lot of sense and be credible to other people. Confirmable, so can other people come to the same conclusion? Can they repeat your research, or can they look at your data and come up with the same outcomes? And then, as I said, useful. So what? Does it have a purpose? You might be fascinated by something. I had a student that was fascinated by ice skating and vestibular function, but does that necessarily tell us anything as occupational therapists? What is the purpose? So the essentials of research, we're going to talk just a little bit about philosophical foundation, which is not as specified in your book. So we started with classicism, moved to modernism, then critical modernism, and then postmodernism, which is where we are today. So classicism is really finding the absolute truth, and this is still where we're at pretty much with quantitative research, although we've moved more into modernism, which is that we are trying to correct errors in knowledge with research, and basically quantitative research falls firmly in the logical positivism, which is that a theory represents one possible explanation of events, and that we can rigorously and logically test those theories. So if you disprove a theory, then you move on to the next one. Critical modernism, and I do apologize because the Screencast-O-Matic is cutting off this a little bit, but critical modernism is a little bit of a criticism of logical positivism, because they're saying you can never really absolutely prove that something is false. You can only show that one theory is maybe a little bit better than another, and actually they're not even sure that you can do that. So in critical modernism, we believe that there's some need for creativity and intuition as well as logic, and that theories are not necessarily corrected by research, but that we can help them to explain things better. Within the culture of research, the way we think things should be done kind of shifts over time. There's some change in theories, and what we think is important, or how we think you should collect data, how research should be shared, is all a part of the culture of the research. And there's definitely a pressure to conform to how currently people think research should be done. So there was a time when people were very much against qualitative research in the sciences, and now there's a feeling that yes, that does have a place. So when we see paradigm shifts, we see an earlier theory being replaced by a newer theory that explains things better than the previous theory. So now in postmodernism, we have the newest ideas, and this is more related to qualitative research, which says that all knowledge is socially constructed and relative. So it just really depends on the person and what they think. And so scientific knowledge is just another body of knowledge. It's not any more important than any other body of knowledge. It's a perspective from a group of people. Although quantitative research, science-based research, presents itself as unbiased, it really can be biased. It can be based on power structures. For example, you always want to know who did that research that says that sugar is good for you or sugar is bad for you. You know, was the sugar is good for you done by the sugar companies? Who put forward the funding for that research? So what are the power structures? And so it's really important in quantitative and qualitative research that you think critically about what is being presented. So the first thing we need to do in research is frame the problem. What is the big problem or the topic area? That's something you're going to be doing this week, is looking at a broad topic area that is of interest to you. So then you want to know what's already known about this topic, and to do that you're going to conduct a literature review by looking at the current literature. And so once you have a broad topic area that you're interested in, you're going to be looking for some literature about that in this class. You want to think about what is the theory base, and you can either use an existing theory, which is more like quantitative research, or you can construct a theory during the research, which is more like qualitative. Once you have your theory base, you're going to develop a specific question. So I might be interested in the theory of sensory integration, and my specific question might be, does treatment once a week in a group for sensory defensiveness make a change in children's behavior? Once we know whether we're going to be doing something quantitative or qualitative, and what the topic and specific question is, we're going to think about what design strategy do we want. So is it more Is our question better answered by quantitative research or by qualitative research? Do we want to do something very experimental and rigid and have a standardized procedure, or do we want to do something qualitative where we're looking to gather a lot of information and maybe develop a new theory? Once we decide what kind of approach we're going to use, we are going to establish the boundaries of the research. So are we going to only look at adults? Are we going to look at people of all ages? Are we going to include people with disabilities or not? Are they going to be all male or female? Does nationality make a difference? Things like that. What are the boundaries of the study? Once we have the boundaries set, then we can determine how we're going to collect our information. Is it going to be numerical, visual, auditory, narrative? Once we have the information, we're going to analyze it. If it's quantitative, we're going to do something like statistics. If it's qualitative, we're going to use one of the qualitative approaches to examining the data. And then we're going to report and disseminate it, because there's not much point in doing research if you don't report and disseminate. So, philosophical foundations. In quantitative research, there's an assumption, and we've kind of talked about this already, that there's one reality and that it's stable over time and that we can discern it. And in quantitative research, we set up a hypothesis, which is a structured statement that says what we think the results of the study are going to be. And we'll talk some more about those. In quantitative research, we have non-experimental, pre-experimental, quasi-experimental, and true experimental. Really, you're trying to aim for true experimental, where you have randomized, subjects and pre and post testing and a control group and that sort of thing. We'll get into all of these things in more depth as we go along. So here's an example from the literature. From the OT literature, sensory sensitivity and strategies for coping with pain. When you see things like cross-sectional design and multi-regression models and the sample size of 116, then you can be pretty sure that this is quantitative. You can look this article up in your AJOT. Take a look at it. Qualitatively, we're assuming that people have different experiences, that it's subjective, it's based on our own perception. And when we look at that, it can be, besides inductive and deductive, inductive being more qualitative, you can also use abductive, where you're sort of adding things together. So this is a list of various types of qualitative research. It is important to understand these well when you're choosing what kind of an approach you want to use. Participatory action research is fairly popular in OT right now, because it's really about advocating for an underrepresented group as a part of the research. Phenomenology is pretty common. Ethnography, both classic and newer way of looking at ethnography, is a common one. And then grounded theory is often used in conjunction with these other kinds of research, qualitative research. So there is rigor in qualitative research. It's really important to look at the authenticity. Did you really represent the meaning and the phenomena under study? Were the conclusions grounded in the data? And a lot of times we use quotes to represent the data that was found and the meanings that were found. And so here's an example from the literature, Parents' Understanding of Play for Children with Cerebral Palsy. And again, you can look that up and take a look at it, but when there's only 7 participants, chances are pretty good that it might be qualitative. So mixed methods is a way to take what's best from each, but you have to be very careful about how you approach mixed methods and making sure that you are considering how you're going to approach that so that one or the other is not overly influenced. by how it's being done.